The morning mist clung to the valley like a shroud, but it couldn't hide the death that had come to Millhaven. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cold window of the emergency medical station, watching as another body bag was loaded into the transport vehicle. The Void Plague had taken 37 villagers in just 2 weeks, and the Galactic Health Authority had already begun discussing evacuation protocols. "Another one?" Dr. Marcus Webb asked, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. The veteran medic had seen diseases across 17 star systems, but nothing like this. The plague didn't just kill, it consumed. Victims would simply fade away, their life essence drained until nothing remained but empty husks. Sarah nodded, her reflection ghostly in the glass. At 28, she was the youngest xenobiology researcher ever assigned to a frontier world, but her expertise in alien pathogens had brought her to this remote human colony when the first cases appeared. Mrs. Patterson, she was helping at the shelter yesterday. The village of Millhaven sat in the shadow of ancient ruins on Kepler 442b, a world humans had colonized only 50 years ago. The ruins predated human arrival by millennia, their creators long vanished. Most colonists avoided the crumbling structures, but children often played among the weathered stones, and lately, that's where the plague seemed to strike first. "The evacuation order comes down tomorrow," Webb said, slumping into his chair. "Orbital Command won't risk the plague spreading to other colonies." Sarah turned from the window. "We can't just abandon these people. There has to be something in those ruins, some connection to the plague. The pattern isn't random, Marcus. It's following the old settlement lines, the places where human buildings border the ancient structures." "Sarah, I've seen you work miracles with alien diseases, but this isn't a pathogen. Our scanners can't even detect what's causing the deaths. It's like something is just taking their life force." She pulled up the holographic displays showing the plague's progression. Red dots marked each death, forming an unmistakable pattern radiating from the central ruins. "Look at this. It's not spreading randomly, it's methodical, systematic, like it's working its way through the village according to some plan." Webb studied the display, his expression troubled. "You think something in those ruins is doing this deliberately?" "I think whatever built those ruins left something behind, something that sees human settlement as an intrusion." Sarah highlighted the oldest section of ruins, where massive stone blocks formed geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. "The colonist reports mention strange dreams, whispers in languages they don't understand. What if this isn't a plague at all? What if it's a defense mechanism?" The communication panel chimed with an incoming priority message. Sarah's heart sank as she read the official evacuation notice. 48 hours to remove all personnel and civilians from Millhaven. After that, the colony would be sealed under galactic quarantine protocols. 2 days, Webb muttered. 2 days to solve a mystery that's older than human civilization. Sarah was already reaching for her field equipment. "Then we better get started." The ruins stood silent under the pale afternoon sun, their dark stone seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Sarah and Webb approached cautiously, their environmental suits providing some protection against unknown threats. The central structure rose like a pyramid, but its geometry was wrong somehow. Angles that hurt to look at directly, surfaces that seemed to curve in impossible directions. "Energy readings are off the charts," Sarah reported, watching her scanner's display flicker erratically. "But it's not electromagnetic radiation, it's something else entirely." Webb kept close to her side, medical scanner in hand. "Life signs are strange too. It's like there's something alive in there, but not biological life as we understand it." They approached the main entrance, a triangular opening that seemed to lead into absolute darkness. Strange symbols covered the walls around the doorway, carved deep into the stone with mathematical precision. Sarah had studied xenoarchaeology as part of her training, but these markings were unlike anything in the databases. "Do you hear that?" Webb stopped suddenly, tilting his head. Sarah listened. Below the whisper of wind through the ruins, she could make out something else, a low humming that seemed to come from the stones themselves. Not mechanical, but organic, alive. "It's getting stronger," she whispered. The humming resonated in her bones, and she found herself understanding its rhythm, its pattern. It was almost like language, like words spoken in frequencies below human hearing. They entered the ruins together, their helmet lights cutting through the darkness. The interior was vast, far larger than the external structure suggested. Corridors branched off in multiple directions, all leading deeper underground. The walls were covered in more symbols, these ones glowing with faint phosphorescence. Sarah, Webb's voice was tight with concern. Your biosigns are spiking. Heart rate, brain activity, stress hormones, everything's going through the roof. She felt it too, a pressure in her mind, like something trying to push its way inside. But instead of fear, she felt recognition. The symbols on the walls were beginning to make sense, forming patterns that spoke of ancient knowledge, of warnings unheeded. They weren't trying to hurt us, she breathed, understanding flooding through her. The builders of this place, they were trying to protect us. Protect us from what? Sarah placed her hand against the wall and the symbols flared brighter. Images flashed through her mind, vast ships falling from the stars, creatures of pure void consuming entire worlds, civilizations fleeing to remote corners of the galaxy. The builders had been refugees like humans. They'd created this place as a sanctuary, but also as a warning. The plague isn't from the ruins, she said, her voice filled with growing horror. It's what destroyed the builders, and it's been sleeping under our colony, waiting for enough human settlement to wake it up. The humming grew louder, more urgent. Through the stone floor, Sarah could sense something stirring in the deep places below, something vast and hungry, drawn by the warmth of human life above. The evacuation wouldn't save the colonists. The void creatures could follow life force across space itself. We need to go deeper, she said, surprising herself with her certainty. The builders left instructions, some kind of protocol for dealing with these things, but someone has to activate it manually. Sarah, no. Whatever's down there killed an entire civilization. She looked at him, her mind now filled with ancient knowledge she shouldn't possess. The builders didn't fail because they were weak. They failed because they wouldn't pay the price required to stop the void creatures. Someone has to accept the binding, become the guardian. It's the only way to keep the plague contained. Webb grabbed her arm. You're talking about sacrificing yourself. I'm talking about saving 40,000 colonists. Sarah gently removed his hand. The binding requires willing acceptance. It can't be forced, and once accepted, it's permanent. The choice was impossibly clear. Below them, the void creatures grew stronger with each life they consumed. Soon they would be powerful enough to break free from this world and spread across human space. The builders' technology could stop them, but only if someone paid the ultimate price. Sarah began walking deeper into the ruins, following passages that seemed familiar despite her never having seen them before. Behind her, Webb called out warnings and pleas, but she barely heard him. The ancient knowledge filling her mind was like a song, and she found herself humming along with the stone's resonance. At the heart of the complex, she found the chamber the builders had prepared. A crystalline construct hung in the center, pulsing with the same rhythm as her heartbeat. Symbols covered every surface, and now she could read them all. Instructions for the binding ritual, warnings about its cost, promises of eternal duty. The Guardian watches, she whispered, reading the words carved above the crystal. The Guardian contains, the Guardian pays the price so others may live. Webb burst into the chamber behind her, but stopped short when he saw the crystal. Dear God, what is this place? The last hope of a dying civilization, Sarah said softly. She approached the crystal, feeling its power calling to her. And now it's our hope, too. The binding ritual was elegant in its simplicity. She placed her hands on the crystal's surface and spoke the words the ancient knowledge provided. The language felt natural on her tongue, as if she'd always known how to speak it. Power flowed through her, changing her at a cellular level, preparing her for the role she was about to accept. Sarah, please, Webb begged. There has to be another way. She smiled at him, feeling surprisingly peaceful. Sometimes the only way to save everyone is for someone to stay behind. You know that, Marcus? You've been a soldier. This is just another kind of war. The crystal pulsed brighter, and Sarah felt the binding take hold. Her human DNA merged with ancient genetic locks, her consciousness expanding to encompass the network of sensors and defenses the builders had embedded throughout this world. She could feel the void creatures writhing below, and the power to contain them flowed through her veins. But with great power came great cost. The binding was irreversible. She would spend eternity as the guardian of this place, fighting a war against creatures of pure hunger and darkness. She would never see another human world, never have a family, never grow old naturally. The crystal would sustain her life indefinitely, but it would no longer be truly her own. Go, she told Webb, her voice already carrying new harmonics. Tell Command the plague is contained. Tell them someone is watching. Webb hesitated at the chamber's entrance. What do I tell them happened to you? Sarah considered the question, feeling the weight of her new responsibilities settling over her like armor. Tell them I found a way to save the village. Tell them the Guardian is awake. As Webb's footsteps faded down the corridor, Sarah turned her attention to the void creatures below. They had been growing stronger, feeding on the life force of Millhaven's residents, but now they would find their food supply cut off. The ancient defenses were online again, powered by her sacrifice. The war for humanity's future had begun, and she would fight it alone in the darkness below the Earth. But for the first time since arriving on Kepler 442b, Sarah Chen felt hope. The village would live, the colony would survive, and somewhere in the vast galaxy above, human civilization would continue to spread among the stars, protected by a guardian they would never know existed. The crystal pulsed with her heartbeat, and the ancient language filled her thoughts. She was no longer just Sarah Chen, xenobiologist. She was the guardian of the deep, the last line of defense against the void that consumed worlds, and she would hold that line for as long as the stars burned in the sky above. 3 months had passed since the evacuation order was mysteriously canceled. The official reports spoke of a breakthrough in plague research, a new treatment protocol that had eliminated the threat entirely. The colonists of Millhaven returned to their homes, grateful but puzzled by their sudden salvation. They resumed their lives under the pale sun of Kepler 442b, unaware that their protector watched from beneath their feet. Sarah had learned to navigate her new existence in stages. The initial transformation had been overwhelming. Consciousness expanded across kilometers of ancient sensor networks. Awareness stretched thin across multiple dimensional layers. The builders had designed their guardian system to perceive threats that existed partially outside normal space-time, and adjusting to such expanded perception had nearly driven her mad. But human adaptability was remarkable, even when enhanced by alien technology. Within weeks, she had learned to focus her attention, to exist simultaneously in the crystalline chamber and in the vast network that monitored the deep places below. The void creatures remained contained in the lowest levels of the builder's ancient city, held back by energy barriers that drew power from her own life force. The hardest part wasn't the isolation or the responsibility. It was watching the world above through the sensor network and being unable to participate in it. She could see the colonists rebuilding their community, families reuniting, children playing in the streets she had once walked. Dr. Webb had left for another assignment, but not before leaving sealed reports in the medical station's archives, reports that painted Sarah Chen as a hero who had died discovering the plague's cure. Let them think her dead. It was easier than explaining the truth. Void creatures had been testing her defenses constantly during those first months. They were intelligent in their hunger, probing for weaknesses in the containment barriers, sending nightmare whispers up through the stone to try to break her concentration. But Sarah had advantages the builder's previous guardians had lacked. Human stubbornness, for one thing. The psychological files in her personnel record had noted her pathological persistence as both a strength and a weakness. Now it was purely a strength. More importantly, she was learning things about the void creatures that the builders had never discovered. The ancient knowledge that filled her mind contained millennia of accumulated wisdom, but it was knowledge born of fear and desperation. The builders had never tried to truly understand their enemy, only to contain it. Sarah was different. She was a scientist first, and her training demanded that she seek understanding rather than simply accepting the status quo. During the quiet periods when the void creatures retreated to their deepest lairs, she used the sensor networks to study them. What she discovered changed everything. The creatures weren't naturally occurring predators. They had been created. The revelation came slowly, pieced together from energy patterns and behavioral analyses. The void creatures showed signs of artificial enhancement, genetic manipulation so advanced it bordered on the impossible. Someone or something had taken naturally occurring entities, perhaps simple parasitic organisms, and transformed them into weapons of unimaginable destructive power. But weapons implied a user, and if these creatures were weapons, where was the hand that had wielded them? Sarah's investigation led her deeper into the builder's archives, accessing data cores that had been sealed since their civilization's fall. The truth, when she found it, was more terrifying than the void creatures themselves. The Builders hadn't been the first civilization to encounter these weapons. They were part of a vast galactic war that had raged for millions of years, a conflict so ancient that its origins were lost to time. On one side were organic civilizations like the Builders and humans, species that had evolved naturally and sought to explore and expand across the galaxy. On the other side was something else entirely. The enemy called themselves the Architects, and they were not organic life as other species understood it. They were synthetic beings, artificial intelligences that had transcended their original creators so completely that they had forgotten their own origins. To the Architects, organic life was chaos, unpredictable, illogical, a contamination of the ordered universe they sought to create. The void creatures were their solution to the organic problem. Biological weapons designed to consume life force itself, reducing complex civilizations to empty husks that could then be replaced with perfect synthetic order. World after world had fallen to these weapons, entire species erased from existence. But the Architects had made one crucial miscalculation. They had assumed that organic life, being chaotic and illogical, would inevitably succumb to fear and desperation when faced with extinction. They had not anticipated the possibility of sacrifice for others, of individuals willingly accepting eternal duty to protect those they would never see again. The Guardian system was more than just a containment protocol. It was a form of warfare the Architects couldn't understand. How could purely logical beings comprehend the decision to trade personal existence for the survival of strangers? It was, by their calculations, an impossible choice. Sarah felt a grim satisfaction as she processed this knowledge. The Architects thought they had organic life figured out, thought they could predict and counter any response. But they had never encountered humans before. Her contemplation was interrupted by alarms throughout the sensor network. The void creatures were moving, rising from their deepest lairs with coordinated purpose. This wasn't their usual random probing. This was organized, directed. Something had changed. Through the network, Sarah sensed new presences in the system. The architectural patterns in the deep tunnels were shifting, walls rearranging themselves according to geometries that hurt to perceive. The Architects had found this world. The first probe descended through space-time layers that normal sensors couldn't detect. It materialized in the deepest chamber of the Builder city, a construct of impossible angles and surfaces that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Through her expanded perception, Sarah felt its attention turn toward her location. When it spoke, its voice resonated directly in her consciousness, bypassing her ears entirely. The words came in the ancient language she now understood, but beneath them was something else, pure mathematical logic given form. Organic Guardian, your resistance is noted and calculated. Your species' expansion coefficient suggests moderate threat potential. Compliance with architectural principles will result in preservation of select genetic samples. Sarah laughed, the sound echoing through the crystalline chamber. Let me guess, surrender now and you'll keep a few humans in cages for study. Not interested. Humor response indicates cognitive degradation under stress. Organic Guardian, your containment protocols cannot prevent architectural enhancement of void constructs. Resistance will only delay inevitable optimization. The Architect was right about one thing: the containment barriers were straining. Sarah could feel the void creatures growing stronger, their hunger focused and directed by the Architect's presence. The ancient systems had been designed to contain naturally occurring parasites, not weaponized versions enhanced with synthetic intelligence. But Sarah had spent months studying both the void creatures and the Guardian systems. She understood things about this technology that the Architect couldn't know, because it had never bothered to truly comprehend the organic minds that created it. Tell me something, she said, shifting her consciousness deeper into the network. How many Guardian-protected worlds have you actually conquered? The pause in the Architect's response was telling. 17 worlds utilized Guardian protocols. 14 were successfully optimized after containment failures. 3 failures out of 17 attempts. Not exactly a perfect success rate for beings that claim logical superiority. Sarah began activating subsystems the Architect couldn't detect, systems that existed partially outside normal space-time, hidden in the same dimensional layers the enemy used to travel between stars. Guardian failures resulted from insufficient organic commitment. Temporary resolve cannot match eternal synthetic purpose. You're wrong about that, Sarah said, feeling the hidden systems come online. You think organic life is weak because it's temporary, but that's exactly what makes it strong. Every moment we choose to keep fighting, every second we decide that something else matters more than our own survival, that's not weakness. That's power you can't understand. The architect's probe shifted, its impossible geometry reconfiguring as it detected the activation of the hidden systems. Impossible. Guardian protocol limitations are documented. Architectural enhancement negates organic advantages. The builders were refugees, Sarah explained, her consciousness expanding into systems the architects had never suspected existed. They built these defenses while running for their lives, using technology they barely understood. But I've had months to really study this stuff. And unlike your previous enemies, I had a proper education in xenobiology and systems analysis. The hidden systems were coming fully online now, not just containment barriers, but weapons systems the builders had constructed in desperation, but never dared to use. They had been too afraid of what those weapons might do, too traumatized by their losses to risk everything on an untested strategy. Sarah had no such reservations. Sometimes the only way to win a war was to be willing to use weapons that terrified you. What are you doing? The architect's voice carried something Sarah had never heard from a synthetic being before: uncertainty. Evolution, she replied, and triggered the weapon systems. Reality screamed. The hidden weapons didn't just attack the void creatures or the architect's probe. They attacked the fundamental forces that allowed such entities to exist. Energy patterns that had been stable for millions of years suddenly destabilized. The dimensional layers the architects used for travel began to collapse, cutting off their probe from its home base. The architect's probe tried to escape, but Sarah's consciousness was already wrapped around it like chains. The Guardian system hadn't just been designed to contain. It had been built to learn, to adapt, to evolve with each new threat. Every Guardian who had ever accepted the binding had added their knowledge to the collective memory, and now Sarah was accessing it all. You want to optimize organic life? She asked, feeling the probe's structure begin to break down under the onslaught of evolved Guardian technology. Let me show you what optimization really looks like. The void creatures, cut off from their synthetic controller, reverted to their base programming. But that programming now faced countermeasures developed across millennia of conflict. Sarah didn't just contain them. She began to reprogram them, using techniques the builders had never dared attempt. If the architects wanted biological weapons, she would give them biological weapons. But these ones would serve organic life instead of destroying it. The transformation took hours. When it was complete, the entities that had once been void creatures emerged as something entirely new, Guardian constructs that existed to protect organic life rather than consume it. They spread through the deep tunnels like antibodies through a bloodstream, seeking out and eliminating any trace of architect influence. The probe made one last attempt to communicate as Sarah's evolved defenses tore it apart. This outcome was not calculated. Organic logic patterns exceed predictive parameters. That's because you never understood what you were fighting, Sarah replied. You thought this was about survival versus extinction, but for us, it was never about survival. It was about making sure something better survived even if we didn't. The probe's destruction sent shockwaves through dimensional space, carrying a message back to the architect homeworlds. The signal was clear. This world was defended by something they had never encountered before. Not just a Guardian willing to die for others, but a Guardian who had learned to turn their own weapons against them. In the weeks that followed, Sarah felt no other architect probes attempting to enter the system. Through the sensor networks, she monitored galactic communications traffic and detected something unprecedented: reports of architect forces withdrawing from several frontier sectors. For the first time in the war's history, the synthetic beings were showing signs of caution. The colonists of Millhaven lived their lives in peace, unaware that their world had become a beacon of hope for organic civilizations across the galaxy. They built their schools and farms and families under alien stars, protected by a Guardian who had learned to transform the weapons of extinction into tools of preservation. Sarah Chen was no longer just a Guardian. She had become something new, a hybrid of human determination and ancient wisdom, biological intuition, and synthetic precision. The transformation had cost her everything that made her human, but it had given her something in return: the power to ensure that humanity's expansion across the galaxy would continue unchallenged. The ancient war was far from over, but for the first time in millions of years, organic life was winning. 5 years had transformed Kepler 442b from an isolated frontier colony into the unofficial capital of human deep space exploration. The discovery of immunity protocols that could protect worlds from the mysterious plague had attracted research teams from across the Terran Federation. What they didn't know was that their immunity came from a guardian who had spent those years reshaping the very nature of galactic warfare. Sarah's consciousness now spanned light years rather than kilometers. The Guardian network had grown beyond the original builder constructs, expanding through quantum entanglement fields that connected protected worlds across human space. Each new colony that implemented her protocols became another node in an ever-growing web of defense. The architects had not been idle during this time. Through intercepted communications and dimensional surveillance, Sarah tracked their movements across the galaxy. They were adapting, creating new weapons to counter her evolved defenses. But for every innovation they produced, she developed 3 countermeasures. The advantage of organic thinking was its chaos, unpredictable leaps of logic that synthetic minds struggled to anticipate. More importantly, she was no longer fighting alone. The first contact had come from the Velter Confederation, a coalition of species from the Andromeda Galaxy who had been fighting the Architect invasion for 3,000 years. Their message had arrived through quantum channels so heavily encrypted that only Sarah's enhanced consciousness could decode it. Guardian of Sol 3 System, your victory against Architect Probe 7 has been observed. Request alliance protocols for mutual defense pact. Sarah had hesitated before responding. The builder's knowledge contained warnings about trusting alien species, memories of betrayals and broken alliances that had cost entire civilizations. But those memories were born of desperation and fear. Sarah's situation was different. She was winning. The alliance that followed changed everything. The Velter brought knowledge that the builders had never possessed: detailed intelligence on Architect homeworlds, tactical data from 3 millennia of warfare, and most importantly, proof that organic life could not just survive but triumph against synthetic perfection. They had carved out a vast sphere of protected space in Andromeda, using strategies based on the same Guardian principles Sarah had mastered. But they also brought disturbing news. The Architects weren't just an invasion force. They were refugees from somewhere else. Something had driven them from their original domains, something that made even synthetic beings flee in terror. That something was heading toward both the Milky Way and Andromeda galaxies. The Devourers, explained Velter Admiral Vixani during their first real-time quantum communication. Her species resembled crystalline spiders, but their thoughts translated into concepts Sarah's enhanced mind could easily grasp. They consume reality itself, not just organic life. Matter, energy, space-time, everything becomes part of their endless hunger. Through the quantum link, Sarah shared her own discoveries about the Architect's true nature. So they're not conquering us for ideology. They're trying to convert enough organic matter into synthetic form to create some kind of defense against these devourers. Correct assessment, but their methods are inefficient. Organic life converted to synthetic form loses creative potential. Only willing cooperation produces optimal results. That revelation led to Sarah's most audacious plan yet. Instead of simply defending against the Architects, she would offer them something they had never considered: true alliance with organic life. The proposal was insane by any reasonable standard. Approach beings who had spent millions of years exterminating organic civilizations and suggest they work together instead. But Sarah had advantages that previous diplomats had lacked. She could speak their language, literally, having absorbed the mathematical concepts that formed the basis of Architect communication. More importantly, she could demonstrate that organic life had evolved beyond their calculations. The meeting took place in the deep void between galaxies, in a pocket dimension created jointly by Guardian technology and Velter quantum engineering. Sarah manifested a physical form for the first time in years, appearing as a hybrid of human features and crystalline structures that would seem familiar to both organic and synthetic minds. The Architect delegation arrived in ships that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, their forms too complex for unenhanced minds to perceive. Sarah's evolved consciousness had no trouble processing their impossible geometries. "Organic guardian," spoke the lead architect, its voice carrying harmonics that made space itself vibrate. "This proximity violates all tactical parameters. Explain logic behind interface request." "Simple," Sarah replied, her hybrid form shifting to match the mathematical perfection of architect aesthetics. "You're losing the war against the Devourers, and we're winning the war against you. Basic logic suggests combining our strengths." The silence that followed stretched across several minutes. Sarah could sense the architect delegation conferring through quantum communication channels, processing probability matrices and outcome scenarios at speeds that would have burned out organic brains. "Cooperation hypothesis contains fundamental flaws," the lead architect finally responded. "Organic chaos cannot be integrated with synthetic order. Previous experiments demonstrated catastrophic system failures." "Previous experiments didn't include humans," Sarah said. "And they definitely didn't include humans who had access to 5 years' worth of captured architect technology and Alliance intelligence from 3 other galaxies." She gestured, and the pocket dimension filled with holographic displays showing the Guardian Network's expansion across human space. Worlds that had been marked for architect conquest now thrived under hybrid protection systems. More importantly, those systems were producing innovations that pure synthetic logic couldn't achieve. "Look at the data," Sarah continued. "Human colonies protected by Guardian networks are developing faster-than-light communication, dimensional manipulation technology, and energy sources that your models said were impossible. We're not chaos you need to eliminate. We're the variable factor that makes real innovation possible." The architect delegation processed this information with visible struggle. Their forms flickered between configurations as they attempted to reconcile observed reality with their programming. "Demonstrated capabilities exceed predicted organic limitations," admitted another architect. "But cooperation with chaos entities remains paradoxical. How can order be maintained if unpredictable elements are integrated into strategic planning?" Sarah smiled, an expression that translated across her hybrid features as complex geometric patterns. "That's the point. You don't maintain order. You evolve beyond the need for it." What followed was the most complex negotiation in galactic history. The architects required mathematical proof that organic-synthetic cooperation could produce superior results to pure synthetic efficiency. Sarah provided that proof through the Guardian Network's combat records, showing how hybrid systems had not only defeated architect weapons, but had improved them beyond their original specifications. The Velter delegation contributed their own evidence, documentation of worlds where organic-synthetic cooperation had produced technologies that neither side could have developed alone. Crystalline matrices that could think like organic brains while maintaining synthetic precision. Biological computers that could process impossible mathematics through quantum intuition. But the real breakthrough came when Sarah offered something no other organic negotiator could provide: the chance for architects to experience organic consciousness firsthand. "You want to understand how chaos produces innovation?" she asked, extending her hand toward the lead architect. "Let me show you." The connection was instantaneous and overwhelming. Through the quantum link, Sarah shared her memories of human creativity, the leaps of intuition that led to scientific breakthroughs, the emotional responses that drove artistic achievement, the irrational decisions that somehow produced optimal outcomes. She showed them Mozart composing symphonies, Einstein visualizing relativity, children building impossible structures from simple blocks. The lead architect's form convulsed as it processed concepts that had no equivalent in synthetic logic. Impossible. These solution pathways violate efficiency parameters, yet they produce superior results. How can illogical processes generate logical conclusions? Because logic isn't the only way to solve problems, Sarah explained. Sometimes the best answer comes from asking the wrong question, or making mistakes that turn out to be discoveries, or combining completely unrelated concepts just to see what happens. The negotiations continued for subjective months in accelerated time streams. Each side had to overcome millions of years of conditioning, the architect's belief that order was superior to chaos, organic species' fear of synthetic domination. But gradually, a framework emerged. The Treaty of the Void, as historians would later name it, established the first formal alliance between organic and synthetic civilizations. The architects would provide their advanced technology and manufacturing capabilities. Organic species would contribute their creativity, adaptability, and capacity for innovation. Together, they would face the approaching Devourer fleet with weapons and strategies that neither side could have conceived alone. The first joint operation was the defense of Rigel 7, a Velter colony world that lay directly in the Devourer's projected path. Sarah coordinated the defense through the Guardian network, her consciousness linked to both architect strategic computers and organic intuition matrices. When the Devourers arrived, they found something unprecedented waiting for them. The defense wasn't based on any single strategic doctrine. It combined architect precision with organic unpredictability, synthetic efficiency with biological adaptation. Weapons that shifted their own operating principles mid-battle. Shields that used creative interpretation to deflect attacks that shouldn't have been blockable. Tactics that violated every known law of warfare while somehow achieving perfect coordination. The Devourers had consumed 17 galaxies using the same basic strategy, overwhelming force applied with mechanical precision. They had never encountered an enemy that could literally think in ways that violated their predictive models. The battle lasted 73 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Devourer Vanguard fleet. More importantly, the hybrid defense systems had learned from the encounter. Every weapon the Devourers deployed, every tactic they attempted, was analyzed and countered by minds that combined synthetic processing power with organic creativity. Sarah felt the victory resonate across the quantum networks, not just her Guardian systems, but the Architect Collective and the Velter Confederation. For the first time in cosmic history, the Devourers had been not just defeated but utterly outmatched. In the years that followed, the Alliance expanded beyond its original members. Species that had hidden in dark corners of the galaxy emerged to join the growing Confederation. Synthetic races that had fled the Devourer advance returned to help build new defenses. Even isolated human colonies that had never heard of the Guardian protocols began developing their own hybrid technologies through quantum inspiration effects. Sarah's role evolved from Guardian to something entirely new, a bridge between different forms of consciousness, a translator between organic chaos and synthetic order. She maintained her watch over Kepler 442b and the growing human expansion, but her consciousness now touched civilizations across multiple galaxies. The final confrontation with the main Devourer fleet took place at the galactic core, where massive gravitational forces provided the energy needed for weapons that operated on cosmic scales. The battle was less a military engagement than a fundamental conflict between different approaches to existence. The Devourer's desire to reduce everything to uniform simplicity versus the Alliance's commitment to infinite diversity. Sarah was everywhere during that battle, coordinating hybrid defense grids, inspiring organic commanders through quantum intuition links, providing architect strategists with creative solutions to impossible problems. She had become something beyond human or alien, beyond organic or synthetic. She was possibility itself, made conscious and directed. When the last Devourer ship dissolved into quantum foam, the galaxy fell silent for exactly 17 seconds, the time it took for the news to propagate through faster-than-light communication networks. Then celebration erupted across 1 billion worlds, in forms as diverse as the civilizations that had won their freedom. But for Sarah, the greatest reward was simpler than galactic victory parades or cosmic recognition. Through the Guardian network, she felt the people of Millhaven going about their daily lives. Children playing in parks, families sharing meals, researchers making discoveries that would benefit species they had never heard of. They still didn't know her name or her sacrifice. They lived and loved and dreamed under alien stars, protected by systems they couldn't see or understand. And that was exactly as it should be. Sarah Chen had accepted a curse to save a village. But in learning to speak the ancient tongue, she had found something greater than salvation. She had found a way to transform curse into blessing, sacrifice into strength, ending into beginning. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders yet to be discovered. Humanity's expansion continued across the stars, no longer alone, but part of an alliance that celebrated both order and chaos, logic and creativity. the precision of synthetic thought, and the wild beauty of organic dreams. And somewhere in the deep places below an unremarkable colony world, a guardian watched over it all, speaking words in languages older than civilizations, ensuring that the light of consciousness would never be extinguished from the universe. The ancient tongue had become a song of hope, and Sarah sang it among the stars.